Okay, so this is the Bass Strait for people that are racing on the bottom side of the world, and everyone knows it can blow there and get interesting. Well, we also sail here in Howe Sound. And so, you know, you could spend a lot of money and go all the way down to the Bass Strait, or you can just come to West Van Yacht Club and do Snowflake Series. So you got to, you know, we got to take sea, state, wind, and in our case, cold water, which is a complicating factor if anyone ends up in it. We got to take those pretty seriously. It's not just other places that can have problems. Stuart?
Yeah, shifts gear. Here, probably the most important one in the rule that's changing in the future is your bilge pumps. So you need to make sure, right now we have to have a bilge pump that's operated from outside. You need to make sure that that hose is actually in a place where it actually works. Someone doesn't have to go below and then spread it out. So it should be in a position where at any time, without anybody doing anything, you can put the handle in and start pumping. The rules that are coming into effect next year is that you have to have also as well a bilge pump that operates from inside the boat and is actually plumbed into the boat so a hose doesn't go out over the side. A person can sit inside the boat and pump it while the companionway is closed. So that's a whole new rule for next year.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
The volume of that that's listed in the regulations is fairly weak in terms of some people are arguing you should just use your foot pump in your sink, or you can bust the ceramic on your toilet and sit there and pump your job school all day, and that'll qualify.
Yeah, well, I think the great thing about sailors is with enough beer and enough sailors, they'll argue anything. But I think the way I would suggest that, well, first, no safety inspector is going to take that as credible. But second, setting aside the safety inspection, honestly, if you're the person responsible for prepping a boat for a distance race overnight in potentially really tough conditions, you got to figure stuff that's actually going to work. It's not going to be your head pump or your galley sink pump that's actually going to help de-water the boat. So, I would encourage skippers and crew members that are responsible for getting boats ready for these events, look at the safety regs as minimums and think about what's actually the right thing to have, and it's probably not going to be the minimum or the bare minimum.
Yeah, and equipment location charts, this is one thing that I've seen not on very many boats. It's something that's coming up in the regulations. If you take the Safety at Sea course, we talk about it a lot. Identifies where through-hull fittings are, where safety gear is kept in your boat. Needs to be in a very high visible location. Usually, often on a bulkhead near the head is a good place, or another copy by the nav station would show where all the rescue equipment is. For instance, where the cutters might be. They might be in if they're a great big long piece of tool, they might be shoved in beside the water tank. But it's really important to have an equipment location chart. It's something that I know is on very, very few boats, and it is one of the new rules. And we teach that at the Safety at Sea, and we use it a lot because it identifies where all these pieces of equipment are. And the other thing is accessible grab bag. And I sail on the Shadow, and Peter, I was reading all this stuff, and one of the things was that you have to have a grab bag inside the boat with a radio. And it's been proven that on a lot of boats that the difficulties happen so quickly that you have no access to the inside of your boat. And so it's very good to have Mountain Equipment Co-op waterproof bag with a shackle on it that's actually attached to the stern push bit, because that's probably the most accessible place that anyone on the crew can get to in an emergency. So radio, any kind of equipment, knife, flares, all your rescue equipment that you might need if all of a sudden the boat is in a perilous manner. So two things that are really important.
Okay, and on life-saving equipment, we're going to talk more about PFDs in a minute, but you know, you need to have, you need to think about a night race. It's a different game when you can't see the person. So in the daytime, if you have someone overboard in any sea state at all, it's remarkably difficult to keep your eyes on that person and get back to them. If you now imagine that you have a man overboard at night, you're in a real problem. So it's really important to think of, okay, these are night races or races with night segments. So, when's the last time somebody opened up the battery, opened up the man overboard light that's attached to the life buoy and changed the battery? And one tip that's a really good idea is when you change the battery, put some tape and use a marker and put the month and year of the battery change. Then when you screw the whole thing back together, that's durable. The date coding is hidden inside the unit. You can write it on the outside too if you want. But then you have an idea what your maintenance regime is. And personally, when I'm thinking about man overboard lights, whether it's the ones on people's life jackets or the one on the life buoy, I don't think when I'm getting ready for straights race, oh yeah, I changed that light last year and we haven't used it. It's like an $8 battery. I take the battery out, I put a new battery in. And then it's in for straights. Okay, well now that's going to be good for Swiftsure too, for example. But really, if someone's in the water, you're going to be counting. Anyone know how long the SOLAS regulation is, how long a man overboard light has to work in the water?
72 hours?
2 hours for the life buoy lights. Yeah, for a life buoy light, only 2 hours. So we have a lot longer nights than that here, and it's cold. So, now you can buy lights that last longer, and one thing's for sure, it won't last very long if the battery's old.
So, boat prep. So if you've been paying attention, you know that we're covering great amount of details. Very diverse, all different things. So, you want to pick what boat you're going to go on? Guess what? The guy in charge of the boat has to have a clipboard. Believe it or not, if you can't figure out which boat to sail on, which boat you want to sail on, if you never see a clipboard,
Don't go on that.
the boat is not prepared. So back in the old days, I was very fortunate to sail with Steve Tupper. He spent a lot of time preparing stuff. And it was, he always had sometimes a briefcase, always a pad of paper, always a list, all this stuff. All the other boats in the club, I never saw anyone carrying any paperwork. But it's something that you have to do. Sailing on a modern boat, going through the regulations, preparing your boat, you have to have paperwork or you have to have a modern piece of equipment that you can check off stuff. So it's really, really important. Flares, wow, this is the biggest change that's coming on, finally. So we all think we're doing our bit with flares and we buy our nice little 2-star rockets. And they're this big. And then a SOLAS flare is this big. And it's a big difference. How many counter power?
Well, you can get a red hand flare, a red marine hand flare approved by the U.S. Coast Guard or Transport Canada with 500 candle power. The same flare, apparently the same flare, approved to SOLAS has a minimum of 10,000 candle power. And another thing, there's lots of differences, but one other one that really always grabs me, to get the Coast Guard or Transport Canada approval, a marine distress flare does not have to be waterproof. So, SOLAS flares have always been strongly recommended. They're rolling into the regs now as required.
And of course, as a personal thing, the laser flare, there's a sample of it over there. The laser flare, which is a personal one, and you could use it on your boat if you run out of other flares. Search and rescue, with his night vision on, can see it 60 miles away. So pieces of equipment like that, you never run out. It's got a battery that's good for perhaps 72 hours. So really good piece of equipment for a personal, and then you can take it with your boat as well.
What is that? Sorry, what's the equipment?
Well, what's on this boat is actually a hand flare. This is about finishing the VicMaui race at night. The range from shore is about a half a mile. And they lit a white hand flare. And this was telephoto lens and it's been digitally zoomed. But that gives you an idea that not only does it light the whole boat up and light a track to the boat through the water, but it lights the sails up as well. So that's a 10,000 candle power SOLAS flare. at something like a half a mile. The hand flares last for approximately 1 to 3 minutes.
If they don't drip.
Yeah, there's a bunch of benefits to them, but
Many
yeah.
things. So, many things preparing for the race. One of the things often overlooked, of course, is your diesel motor, because no one plans to use it. But before you do a straights race or any other race where the boat's going to possibly be shaken up, one of the first things you should do, or on your list, is again change the filters in your diesel. Because then you got fresh filters that can deal with whatever's in your tank. If you find out your filter is extremely dirty, then you know you have to deal with something more than just the filter actually getting your fuel either changed or cleaned. So a fuel filter kind of warns you ahead of time of what might be up.
Stuart?
Yeah, so one of the things here that a lot of boats don't do is if you lose your rig, the very last thing on the list there is securely fasten your mast to the boat. It's something that wasn't on the regulations before. It is now. It was always in VicMaui and some of the other larger races where there's perhaps a greater possibility of losing your rig, but it's something that all boats that have a mast that is keel stepped inside the boat, so that if the mast breaks, the butt of the mast doesn't then come up and injure a crew member or do further damage to the boat. Because it's quite common for boats that have lost rigs that the mast lifts out of the step and then it can openers the top of the deck right off the boat. So it's not a safe thing. It's bad for the boat, but it's also bad for any crew members that are inside the boat. So that's new to the regulations, and it's always been in VicMaui, I guess, but it's new for all of them coming up. And of course, the other one is mainsail reefing. A lot of boats don't have enough reef points on their sails, and it's really necessary to kind of address that early.
Identification here, straights requires sail numbers and does not require the display of sail numbers on the lifelines. So when you go to do Swiftsure, they want the sail numbers on the lifelines. Technically, under the special regulations, if you were under bare poles, you're supposed to be displaying your sail numbers. So you should have that in the back of your mind. If you're going to do races like Straits and Swiftsure and Van Al and Oregon Offshore and so on, you really should have sail number panels, whether or not you're going to display them in races where they're not required. One clarification thing here, because this could easily catch people, the new version of the PIAA regs, PIAA is making a really big deal. In fact, they described the biggest change made to the PIAA regs is that you don't have to carry a signed category certificate on the boat anymore. And I actually don't think that's the biggest change, but anyway, that's what they're saying on their website. Don't get caught in straits though, because we're under the 2013 rules and you do have to have your category certificate on the boat. So just keep that in the back of your mind. That was the rule in 2013. That's the rule straits is being sailed under. So you got to have your signed category certificate with you. And you're going to get asked for that when you get to the inspection dock. Okay, we're going to take a beer break now, and we'll be back in 10 or 15 minutes.